I'm Brad Keelor, Director of the Geo-Institute. Welcome to another great episode of Director's Cut. Before we get to the interview, I need to tell you about a contest we're running for the 100th episode of Director's Cut. That's right, we're almost to 100 shows. Our special episode will air November 9th and will feature geo legend Jim Mitchell as my guest, and you can be involved too. Submit your question for Jim at the link in the show notes below, and if it's chosen, you'll get a $200 discount on registration for geo-congress 2023. It's a great way to be involved in Director's Cut and to save a little money on your trip to Los Angeles in March. Thanks for watching, thanks for your questions, and now let's get to this week's episode.
I am Brad Keelor, aka Bill Swirsky. He is Sean Ahdi. Next up on Director's Cut, find out how traffic is sometimes worse in other cities other than Los Angeles.
I saw a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand, walking through the streets of Soho in the rain. Looking for the place called Lee Ho Fooks.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every week, and sometimes for special occasions like Halloween, I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell. Some of them are personal, some are professional, and all of them are fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, after you watch this today, head over to geoinstitute.org. There you will find out that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, and really, how could you not? Click like, click subscribe, click get notifications. We will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. So, what's going on here, you may say? Well, it's Halloween, and a certain GI director from a certain ASCE institute is just being a fan of a certain team from the Midwest, from a city whose name starts with C and ends with O and has a hickog in the middle. Bears. I'm joined this fine Halloween from the Mountain Time Zone, where he is employed by the United States Geological Survey. It is Sean Ahdi. Sean, how are you?
Greetings. Thanks, Brad.
Happy Halloween.
Happy almost Halloween. Thank you.
We've got 10 questions, the same way we do every week. Some of them I will read in my voice, and some of them I will read in Bill Swirsky's voice. We have two that we ask everybody, and we start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Well, as a U.S. government employee, I have to disclaim that anything that I describe in the next half an hour or 45 minutes are my own views and do not represent the views of the U.S. government. But in that regard, we look at databases of recorded earthquakes, and we try to understand how much different places will shake and what their hazard levels are in potential future earthquakes. And we make models that go to the building codes. And to be less technical, we just do science for the people, science for everyone, and try to be good public servants, disseminate information, answer questions, help people in our field understand what's shaking on the ground underneath them.
And we, as the American public, greatly appreciate that. I hope that everybody out there has seen the Did You Feel It maps, for example, a great service that the US Geological Survey provides. Hopefully you've all been out somewhere hiking and seen a stream gauge or something like that and said, you know what, my tax dollars paid for that. That's my Geological Survey, baby.
Your tax dollars at work. Exactly.
Exactly. So we have to get into the fun questions next. You didn't like the one that I was asking. You didn't have a good answer. So we're going to change it up here right on the fly. And I'm going to ask you this one. Describe one of your oddly specific Halloween costumes that you've worn in the past.
I'm not a big costume person, so I'm playing a sad Chargers fan right now. But also, that's not really a costume. That's reality for the last 20 years. One time I have a good friend in my geology classes who was my TA first, and it was classic San Diego surfer guy. He had long blonde wispy hair, and he always wore the same flannel. So for the department Halloween party, his roommate stole that flannel for me, and I bought a Kurt Cobain wig, walked around, almost won the competition for best costume because if you were there, you would know him. It would have been good. We had a picture together side by side. So
I think it's good no matter what, because the fact that we've reached a point in society where we can do Kurt Cobain Halloween costumes, that speaks volumes about our culture, I think. And I do have to mention, I said this before we started, that was a runner-up to today's costume. So if anybody wants to see me as Kurt Cobain, maybe that'll be coming your way someday soon. You took kind of a winding road to what you're doing now. Think back to your civil engineering undergrad and tell us the story of how you ended up doing what you're doing. And I guess you love what you're doing.
What am I doing? I'll switch some hats. We wear different hats, right? All right. So here's my USGS field hat, semi-official. Actually, it's high visibility, so we always have our PPE. That one was a hard hat, also PPE. So what do we do at the USGS? Well, or what was it? How did I get to where I got?
Yeah, start with your civil engineering undergrad.
So my dad was a civil engineering major at the University of Michigan. This was my bonus hat for you, Brett. And then he never practiced civil while I was alive, but he always talked about it. And the way he tells the story is, one day he comes up to me and he says, "Dad, what's civil engineering?" And he's like, "Why?" It's like, "I don't know. I'm applying to college. I'm thinking about it." And he's like, "No, don't do that." And so 15 years later, I have like 3 degrees in civil engineering, which is funny. I started off like most kids liking Legos and building things. So I was enamored by tall buildings and structures and long bridges and stuff. And then I take statics in undergrad, sophomore year, Civil 101 at UCLA, and I got a D-. And then they're like, "We need to reprocess the grades," and I got a D+. I retook the class 2 years later, and I got a B-. So basically, my friends started saying, "We're not crossing any bridge that Sean ever designs." I think that's probably a good public service. So I also tell my students over the years, like, see, you can get D's and you might turn into something and be interviewed someday. So then after not wanting to do structural engineering, I got a little bit into the geotechnical side through the student groups, which I think most people have talked about, the ASCE chapters at the universities. So it was, we had a geotechnical group.
You're going to talk more about that later, though.
There's too many stories, Brad. So how did we get to where we are? Oh man. I started civil. I became more geotechnical. I added a geology double major. Apparently no one had done that at the time, engineering, geology, and civil at the same time. And then master's degree at UCLA in geotech, but in most West Coast schools, you do a lot of heavy earthquake engineering focus. So that became a way I could integrate the earth science component that I had also studied, and some geophysical internship that I had with some summer research that I'd done with Scott Brandenburg, who's done a director's cut, and into my PhD research, which was a lot of like understanding different types of site characterization and geophysical measurements and different types of soil and rock and how they're affected by earthquake shaking and how they affect earthquake shaking. Your soft soils can amplify shaking a lot. So that was a really twisted way of getting to how I do what I do at the USGS, but it's been fun, and I'm glad I got to have my hands involved in many different fields and not really get labeled as one thing. I don't fit in any of their boxes.
That's great, though, and what a journey, and thanks for telling the story. We're going to go right back into something. I mean, they're all fun, but we're going to go into something super fun now. You speak Farsi.
Yes.
What is the coolest thing about the Farsi language?
All right, hold on. In honor of my parents, who are in San Diego, I'll switch to a Padres hat, who sadly lost the other day, but, you know, we still represent. They made it this far after all these years. So some interesting things about Farsi, or some people say Persian, and then that's from the country Iran, for people who might be confused why there's different names for the same language. It's a very old language, and it has like roots from the Indo-European language tree. So arguably Farsi is more linguistically connected with Northern European languages than Middle Eastern languages, like proximal countries, and their languages like Arabic and Hebrew. And it's also very connected with Hindi, the most spoken language in the Indian subcontinent. So, you know, I'd be in like high school at my best friend's house, his parents were from India, and we just like play these games like, tell me a word and we'll see if it's the same in Farsi and Hindi. So things like the word onion, I'll never forget this. It's like piyaz in Farsi and piyaz in like Hindi. It's really interesting. But then in Farsi, because of historically when there was a Muslim conquest and they brought the language of Arabic and the Arabic writing into their domain, they kind of infused that with the old Farsi language. This was, I don't remember, many centuries ago. So there's a lot of Arabic language elements in the Farsi language. So then one day I had some friends from different Arabic countries in grad school, and then Arabic speaking countries, I should say. And so we start finding words that are identical. And so it's like, oh, you could probably eventually learn Arabic too. And then another interesting one is that, like, I've been told anecdotally, like by my grandfather and my dad, one of the languages du jour, wow, that was an accident, was French. In Iran, they used to learn French as the second language instead of English. And so there's a lot of French vocabulary in the Farsi language as well. Like we say merci, like merci for thank you. And then growing up in San Diego, I learned Spanish pretty easily, but I don't remember not being bilingual. Like my parents first taught me Farsi, learned English, and then I think it was easy to learn Spanish after that. So it was always kind of like, I wondered why I was doing better than other students. I thought they just didn't care. And then you live in a place like LA where there's people from everywhere. You see every language, culture, anything from the world. And at UCLA, which is, pretty good school, honestly. And then specifically in LA and in UCLA, it's like the largest Iranian population in the world outside of Iran, I think. So there's a lot of people from Iran come to UCLA to do grad school. So then I started developing this technical vocabulary that I never had from my parents. And another twist to that is because my parents immigrated like 40 years ago, the vocabulary I learned from them has been changed as the language evolved in Iran to the people that came in the last, 5 to 10 years that I befriended in school. So they're like, oh, your Farsi's so cute. It's like, I'm sorry, I was born here. This is how I learned it. But it's really cool. It kind of expands your mind on like how different languages and like lead to come from different historical contexts, and like human migration lead to different ethno-linguistic groups. And you can go way back in time, or you can come right up to the present, and it's still changing. So that's cool. I end up on a lot of Wikipedia rabbit holes, not on taxpayer time, looking that stuff up.
That is fantastic. I think the other one that kind of gets frozen in time, like the language, is food.
Yes.
And a lot of people live here for, 40, sometimes even 60 years, and are cooking what they see as like authentic dishes from their home country. And someone visits who's been living in that country forever, and they're like, well, nobody's eaten this since about 1985.
Yeah.
So I didn't think about language being that way, I guess, but that makes a lot of sense. So next time, Geo-Congress, we're going to have to get you up in front of everybody and get you to drop some technical Farsi terms for
We'll
us.
do
That
that.
would be excellent.
Well, there'll be much better people qualified than me to do technical Farsi, but I can
Yeah,
definitely.
but it's going to be more entertaining if it comes from you, Sean.
I was gonna say I can entertain, and if it's in LA, we got all the good Persian restaurants there. So
we're going to talk about earthquakes again for a minute, and this is another nostalgia question. You have to look way back. Was there a moment you knew you wanted to study earthquakes?
study, but it kind of came after many years and remembering these moments. So I mean, I was alive when Northridge happened in 1994, but it was in LA. We didn't get really strong shaking in San Diego, and I probably slept through it. I don't like, my parents never talk about it. Then when I was 10, we moved to Seattle for 2 years. My dad's family all has lived in Seattle for a long time. And within a month, I felt the biggest earthquake of my life. Where like when you're a kid, everyone says California's earthquake country, but probably the general public didn't really appreciate that the Pacific Northwest has a significant seismic hazard. So this was the 2001 Nisqually earthquake, which was about a 6.8 magnitude, and it was pretty deep. So what happens with deep, far away earthquakes is all the high frequency jolty shaking kind of dampens out. When you get farther away, it's those long waves that get to you. So I think we were probably maybe 60 miles north, and I was in fifth grade, and I remember, like, you know, in like elementary school where they have the desks in different configurations and every month they move them around, maybe so the kids don't get bored. So that day, the kid sitting in front of me was always shaking our 4 desks with his foot. And we'd be like, Brian, stop. He'd be like, haha. And then like an hour later, Brian, stop. Brian, stop. And then he's like, I'm not doing anything. And then I looked up, and like you can see this like corner of the room behind me, right? I looked at this in our like old small portable classroom, and it was doing this. It was freaky. And it went on and on and on. I mean, I don't know what time perception is when you're 10 or 11 years old, but it could have been 20 plus seconds of like really long swaying, long period shaking. And the teacher was like, everyone under your desks. So, and then we evacuated, and they're like, you know, mind the overhead power lines. It was kind of traumatic. I think I was like kind of shaking. I thought I was shaking for like the next week. And so then we moved back to San Diego. We don't feel many earthquakes. Then I go to civil engineering, and then I find out, you know, we have this department of geotech professors, which I won't get into too much now, but there's some really world expert earthquake engineers like that. We're just kind of, you know, walking around and not doing that well in their classes, and maybe I should take advantage of this and get my act together. And I always kind of go back to that because in my PhD research, I did a lot of subduction zone, ground motion model development support with a lot of the site characterization related to that. And so I was like staring at maps of Washington and Oregon, and I was like, oh, this earthquake that I felt. And I think that's when it really all coalesced for me, which is pretty
That's
cool.
amazing. And what a great story. And that, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Story checks out, I think. I would have been worried if you hadn't gone into earthquake engineering at that point.
Go feel an earthquake. You'll like it. Did you feel the Mineral Virginia one in 2011?
Yeah, there's an amazing story about that, how I thought it was a truck and I ended up going to the wrong meeting, and mine wasn't canceled because of the earthquake, and I was convinced it would be. That's a story for another time.
All right.
It's a goodie.
Good to know.
The other question we ask everybody when they come on Director's Cut is, how did you first get involved with the #1 institute of the #1 technical society in America, the ASCE and the Geo-Institute?
That's funny. Okay, I'll put my UCLA hat on now. So yeah, this is what I accidentally started answering earlier, huh? Sorry, the stories all blur together. I don't know how many
That's okay.
times.
That's why I'm a pro at interviewing, Sean.
It's part of the job description. So yes, the students in the UCLA Civil Engineering Department tried to all indoctrinate into the ASCE student chapter. There's some resistance, but usually you find out that that's where the fun is. And then the free pizza, of course. I think Professor Hashash was talking about that. And you just you meet people, you learn different aspects of civil, and we had these guest speakers, these info sessions. And then I think by junior year I got more involved in the geotech group. We had another small student chapter for geotechnical inclined students, grad students, and the faculty were involved. And we just first I got into the geo wall competition, which Pavlo, Chrysovergis, Taki, you guys are listening. We did that. We all did that together at the same time back in the early 2010s. Pablo and I were co-captains, and we were running the geotechnical student group. We were doing the geo wall. We started going to the national competitions, mainly because Pablo knew what he was doing. And then, it was like a junior, senior, super senior. By the first two geo-congresses I went to, which were, San Diego, so I was very proud in 2013, and Atlanta and Oakland.
Yep, you got it. Atlanta 2014.
No, I got to go
Oakland
back.
2012.
No, I'm even wrong. I think it was 2010 when I first went. 11, Dallas, Oakland, and then by San Diego in 2013, I had started doing undergrad research with Scott Brandenburg. And so then it was we're going to the Geo Congress anyways because of the Geo Wall, but I pulled myself off of the competition team because I was going to present a research poster. And that one, it was I was starting to meet a bunch of professionals, people who are in GI leadership, and the professors of the schools that I was applying to for grad school. So I was that guy that targeted who I needed to go talk to and did a pre-meet before I had the grad school applications going. And so, I just kind of got roped into it from there. I stayed at UCLA for grad school. And then I was mentoring the undergrads in the geotech student chapter and the GeoWall team at UCLA. And then this thing came up, this opportunity to be on the Geo-Institute Student Leadership Council. And we had a little executive board. So I met a lot of friends that you've interviewed, Menzer Pehlivan, Tuğçe Başar, all the good student leaders that have become successful in industry and academia. I'm definitely forgetting names, but those are the ones that come to mind. So then we did that, and then I was kind of in the leadership, and then I was the chair of the GISLC, the Student Leadership Council, for a year, which allowed me to talk to I think then the president of the board was Yusuf Hashash. So getting some good encouragement from someone at that level. He was why couldn't you be the president of the GISLC? All right, cool, thank you. And then I met this guy with the sunglasses and the Bears hat, and then kept in touch. It's been a really good way to advance the career and just meet a lot of really smart people, and I think that's the best part.
Good stories, and we're happy to have you, of course. And for all the students watching, one, if you're watching this and you're a student, you're not an ASCE or GI member, it's free, so you should probably become one. And GeoWall, the student competitions at Geo-Congress are a great way to get involved. And even if you don't do that, we have many other ways you can get involved with GI as well. So that's another thing you can, when you head over to geoinstitute.org, check out our volunteer opportunities. We would always love to have you.
Just don't tell them you got a D in statics.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little bit here. First, though, we have to get to the thing that we teased at the top. The question was phrased, what's your scariest LA driving or traffic story? You're going to start with that, and then you've got something else to add.
Well, I can't answer anything straightforwardly. I work for the government. I'm joking. It's a joke. That's a personality quirk. Yeah, I lived in LA for 12 years. I grew up in San Diego. Everyone in San Diego hates LA. Now they've stolen the Chargers. People are very
Are they
disappointed.
still angry about the Clippers? And
The Clippers, I mean, that happened before I was born, thankfully, but the Clippers never won any championships, so neither did the Chargers. So I guess some people are probably still upset. And so, LA is like, it can be 10:30, 12:30 at night and it's gridlock. And then you go 5 miles, 7 miles to the airport. It takes 50 minutes. You drive. Oh, these are great stories. Like carpooling with Jon Stewart and Scott Brandenburg to the LA Geo-Institute chapter meetings out at Stevens Steakhouse down in the City of Commerce, a few miles southeast of downtown LA. But coming from the west side of LA, it's like maybe 20 miles, less than 20 miles. And one time with those two and another fellow grad student took 2.5 hours to get there. And it's like, this just doesn't make any sense. Like, and it's like, well, no wonder we don't go to all of the dinner meetings because they're not far. They just take too long. So I thought, all of these bad LA stories, I never once got a ticket in LA. I never once got a speeding ticket. I never once got I got an offender better in the parking lot, but that wasn't my fault. Then I moved to Denver. I'm in a suburb of Denver, and it was New Year's Eve. And of course, what do you do on New Year's Eve? You wait for the nighttime. So all day I'm just sitting at home. I don't know what to do. It starts snowing in the mountains. I have a nice view of the Front Range. I'm very fortunate for that. It starts snowing, and then it wasn't going to snow here until maybe 6 p.m. So in the morning, I got up, I drove around the mountains, was maybe going to go for a walk in the snow. I love the snow because I was deprived my whole life in SoCal. And then it starts snowing, and I was like, I'll just drive up this like nice creek side road. And I kept going and I kept going, and the snow's getting heavier. And it's like, I should probably turn around. I just kept going and it kept going. And then, okay, I'm going to make a loop and go back to the freeway. And then I go up this road, and it had a super elevated bank, and there was a car stuck in the ditch. And this is a residential area, but it's kind of forested. There was this Ford SUV was stuck in the ditch. And as I approached it, I thought he was going to pull out. So I slowed down, and my car just sadly lost momentum and slid sideways into the ditch. And the snow's getting heavier. I'm kind of scared. I threw the parking brake in. I asked the guy for help. He has his little kids with him. He doesn't really want to help me, but he felt bad. So he starts throwing sand onto the middle of the intersection. It was a very bad road, very icy. And then someone else gets stuck. They try to get out. They slide backwards and hit my front bumper. And then this teenager driving his dad's lifted brand new Jeep Wrangler, he was stuck. He unstuck himself. He made a bad U-turn. I saw this thing fishtail. And thankfully, I was out of the car at that point. In slow motion, crushed my driver's door, T-boned my car. And now it's really in the ditch. And the snow is getting heavy, and stupid me was like, well, I'm not going to go for any hikes today. So I wore like old running shoes. Now my feet are freezing. The visibility is getting lower. People are driving by. We're just like, just keep driving. You're going to get stuck. Just go. And then like you call the towing company, and they're like, it's going to take an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. No, we're not going to send anyone. It's getting too dangerous. So So the moral of that story is don't go looking for trouble in a snowstorm on New Year's Eve. But that was very much a goodbye 2021. And there were some nice neighbors that put toe straps on the car and pulled me out. And the guy's like, do yourself a favor and just go home. Don't stop. Don't pass go. Don't collect 200. Just go home. And
see, what I got out of that is when people come to LA for Geo-Congress, they can do whatever they want on the road and they won't get a ticket.
Well, I'm sure I'm not going to condone that as a government employee. People will do what they do.
So as we've mentioned a couple of times throughout the interview here, you are now a USGS employee. You've been there for a little while now. What was your biggest misconception about USGS before you started working there? And we're back to the field hat.
Oh boy, this sounds like I'm going to get in trouble for answering this question. Biggest misconception is are all government employees lazy? No, they're not. There's a lot of extremely smart people that we're really fortunate to work with. But I think what I didn't really appreciate was how much you can really have the opportunity to, like, spread the science out, do some science communication. That's like, obviously it seems like I like to talk a lot. So I got into the science communication like subcommittee in our office, and there was a 5.1 in San Jose or California yesterday, and it was one of the bigger ones in the Bay Area in probably 8 years. And so, like, just trying to understand how the media wants to call and get information directly from the scientists, directly from the source. It's really interesting to see how that develops on the back end. And there's a lot of, like, super smart people. I guess that's not a misconception. Probably would have assumed that. But you also see how other elements of the government work. Maybe that wasn't a misconception either. That was more just seeing how's the sausage made, as one of our mentors like to say. But it's been good. And coming from consulting to this, I'm sure some people are gonna laugh at me for changing my work hours, but that was not a misconception either. That was like, I knew what kind of work-life balance I might get myself into.
So you didn't really offend anybody with that answer, I think. So we're gonna hit you with the next question so that you can get into a little bit of trouble. See how I backloaded all these in the interview?
Oh, that's totally fine. They're techniques.
Scott Brandenburg's name has come up already. John Stewart's name has come up already. You could name others. Tell us something we don't know about the geotech faculty at UCLA.
Oh my goodness. This is, it's funny. I've even thought about this answer, and I still have to think about what I'm gonna say. So John and Scott are like 6'5", and like, I don't know how tall Scott is because it's always different. So he's shorter than John, let's put it that way. And so there's like sometimes, like, when the students you take one class with each one of them, and especially in the grad program, you start to get to know them. And then, Scott will say something like, at least I don't hit my head on the overhead compartment in the airplane like John does, or let like squish like this. Whereas like John will be like, he can like reach the high shelves and stuff. The pull down string for the screen projector in one of the classrooms was too high because it had a knot tied in the middle of the thread. And so it was like, it was beyond standing height for most normal people. So I'm sure John could reach it, but Scott would have to jump up and grab it and pull it down. John seems intimidating because of his stature, but he's super nice, family man, and likes to invite the students over for student professor barbecues multiple times a year, which is really cool. And then he'll tell you the story about, I built this guest house in my backyard, and I did the design, and I did the site investigation, and I wrote a letter to the city of LA petitioning that we shouldn't do a direct shear test on a modified Cal sampler because I know what I'm doing, because I'm John Stewart. I'm kidding, but that's how the story went. So yes, of course, they can design their own foundations and still be able to teach it to a level that us students would understand, and I think we appreciate that.
That is amazing. So what a great experience, and a little bit of a twins situation there to shout out an early 90s subpar movie. I don't know what Rotten Tomatoes says about that, but we had to drop that into conversation. We are down to the final question. As we mentioned earlier, as you are watching this, well, maybe not, you might be lazy and not watch our videos right when they get posted. But if you're watching this when it goes up, it is Halloween. This is our Halloween episode. We have to do a little Halloweening in here. Rank your top 5 Halloween candies.
Do you want me to go 1 to 5 or 5 to 1, or just?
Either way. I mean, it's up to you.
Mixed bag.
Number 1 is Ditka.
Ditka. Is that a candy? No, I'm kidding. It's a joke. Is that onion rings behind you, by the way? I never thought about that.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Polish sausage, pork chops,
Don't
onion
get
rings.
me going. It's lunchtime over here. One of my favorites was Milky Way Midnight. Like they took the Milky Way and they made it dark chocolate and they make the nougat white. It was just I just pretended like they were marshmallows. Three Musketeers. I don't know, like the little, like when I was a kid, I hated Reese's Cups, and like so I would just gladly give them away to other people or my dad. And now like I'm like realize that was a mistake. Those are good. And I don't have the problem where like, oh, I have kids, so I like have to hide the candy. It's like I can eat it if I want, and I probably will, or I should just not buy any. Actually, when I was TAing, I used to buy like a bag of Halloween candy, and then like that week or two around Halloween, I would, you call on students to ask questions, and then I would throw them candy like across the classroom to see if they actually answer the question. Sometimes they're asleep and they don't catch it, but it wakes them up. And I didn't get to 5. What else? I can tell you what I really don't like.
Let's go for it.
The candy corn. That is like a disgusting abomination of like neon capitalistic high fructose corn syrup, everything that our generation wants to complain about. Put it into this cone shape. Maybe it's a CPT tip. Oh man, I never thought about that.
There you go.
No, there you go.
I mean, and to be fair, it's not always a cone shape. You can get the little pumpkins, you could get maple leaves, but when it burns your throat, it's gonna be good.
If there was a mouthwash commercial, I won't say the name of the company, even though I've already done. And then the old grandpa would be swigging the mouthwash, and it was full of like alcohol, and the grandkid would be like, like the grandpa would be like, if it burns, it works. And then the kid was like, it doesn't have to burn. This is non-alcoholic mouthwash. And it's like, that's what you just reminded me of.
So 98 episodes into Director's Cut.
Oh,
and I think
man,
that's the first time we've discussed mouthwash. And you
that's
never
awesome.
know where it's going to go. But you made it through all 10 questions, Sean, and you did so with many different hats on. And I hope people out there appreciate the metaphor there. We learned a lot today.
Mm-hmm.
So for our viewers, if you liked what you saw, and you're here at the end, so you probably did, click like, subscribe, get notifications. We, of course, will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel, which is very frequently. I guess we have to say Happy Halloween. That's kind of the de rigueur thing here. And in my Superfans hat, I gotta say, in a one-on-one between Ditka and Terzaghi, who comes out on top? I think Terzaghi has a strong first half. Ditka comes on late. Ditka 27-24.
I won't refute that.
So Sean,
we're still waiting for the Chargers to do something. So
thank you for doing this today. Thanks for all the answers, and thanks for playing along for one of our holiday episodes. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thanks for the chat and the opportunity to play.
And we will see everybody in just a couple of days with a brand new regular Wednesday Director's Cut.
Werewolves of London. Draw blood. Werewolves of London.
So I gotta ask here,
Where did I screw up?
you really got a D-?
Oh yeah.
I didn't think those actually existed. I thought they just failed you. Like,
Well,
at
the
that
way-
point, what's the point?
Exactly, right? You might as well teach someone a lesson the actual way. I never did get an F. That probably would have looked a lot worse in retrospect.